Tonight on All In.
For years, Donald Trump engaged in deceptive business practices and tremendous fraud.
Donald Trump loses big in court.
It validates everything that I've been saying all along. That Donald Trump's a con man, he's a cheat, and many other things.
A New York judge says Trump's fraud shocks the conscience.
Their complete lack of contrition and remorse borders on pathological.
Republican frontrunner hit with crippling financial constraints.
You need a monitor to babysit.
He cannot move money without saying mommy.
He's now in a crib and the babysitter's sitting next to him.
Tonight, how a lifetime of fraud finally caught up to Donald Trump, and the man leading the Russian resistance to Vladimir Putin dies in a Siberian prison.
Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
The incredible story of Alexei Navalny and what his death means for Putin's war, when All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. A lifetime of fraud has finally caught up to Donald Trump in a court of law. Today, the judge in the ex-president's New York civil fraud trial ruled that he will have to pay nearly $500 million in fines as a result of his years-long fraudulent practice of inflating the value of his assets beyond what they were actually worth. Additionally, the ex-president will be barred from operating a business in New York for 3 years. His two adult sons, Eric and Don Jr., as well as his longtime business associate, Alan Weisselberg, each received fines of at least $1 million as well, along with their own respective bans from operating a business in this state of New York for a number of years. Perhaps the most egregious example of this fraud, or at the very least the most notable, the most easy to understand, was Trump's practice of habitually lying about the size of his Trump Tower penthouse apartment. It was so blatant that Alan Weisselberg had no choice but to admit it under oath as part of the trial. Quote, Weisselberg said he was aware that Trump's Trump Tower apartment was 10,000 square feet and not the 30,000 square feet used to determine its value on financial statements. Another witness, former Trump senior VP Jeffrey McConney, testified that Trump's triplex apartment was valued at $180 million in the financial statements based on the inflated square footage, and the real value and size were about a third of that. Reacting to that blatant and brazen fraud, Judge Arthur Engoron summed up Trump's habitual belief that he can act without consequences. Quote, the English poet Alexander Pope first declared to err is human, to forgive is divine. Defendants apparently are of a different mind. After some 4 years of investigation litigation, the only error, inadvertent of course, that they acknowledge is the tripling of the size of the Trump Tower penthouse, which cannot be gainsaid. Their complete lack of contrition and remorse borders on the pathological. Pathological might just be the perfect word for Trump's behavior. But Donald Trump engaging in fraud and specifically inflating the value of his properties is not itself a new revelation. It's emblematic of who he is as a person. It's something people have spoken about for years. In fact, 5 years ago this month, Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, blew the whistle to Congress about this very issue.
It was my experience that Mr. Trump inflated his total assets when it served his purposes, such as trying to be listed amongst the wealthiest people in Forbes, and deflated his assets to reduce his real estate taxes.
Now, 5 years later, Trump is facing accountability for his fraud in a court of law. This is a man who, his entire adult life, attempted to bend reality to his will, a man who, of course, lies habitually and shamelessly. And while he may be able to convince his supporters that everything he says is true, he can't convince courts. As Judge Engoron said in his ruling, quote, this court is not constituted to judge morality. It is constituted to find facts and apply the law. In this particular case, in applying the law to the facts, the court intends to protect the integrity of the financial marketplace and thus the public as a whole. It's worth reiterating here, the judge is protecting the integrity of the public from Donald Trump himself, something no other institution but the courts has really been able to do thus far. Time and time again, the courts have been the last line of defense against Trump's aberrant criminal behavior. It was true within just the past few months, where Trump twice lost in civil court after he was found liable for sexually abusing and then defaming writer E. Jean Carroll. As a result, Trump has been ordered to pay her more than $80 million. Going further back to 2020, when Donald Trump was attempting to steal the election, and his big lies spread like wildfire throughout the general public, helped by Fox News and others, it was again the courts that put a stop to it. Because when rules of facts and evidence and procedure apply rather than lies and bluster and conjecture, Trump lost every meaningful case. There was no there. And now today, the same thing. He's lost again today because he is exactly what his fiercest critics say he is. To the degree that he's used propaganda and this shamelessness that he possesses to create this alternate version of MAGA reality in the public sphere, he simply cannot do it inside a courtroom. As New York State Attorney General Letitia James noted today, in court, no one deserves special privileges.
Today, justice has been served. Today, we prove that no one is above the law. No matter how rich, powerful, or politically connected you are, everyone must play by the same rules.
For his part, the ex-president tried to put a brave face in public while sort of wistfully reminiscing about his life before politics.
If I weren't running, none of this stuff would have ever happened. None of these lawsuits would have ever happened. Nothing would. I would have had a nice life. But I enjoy this life for a different reason. We're going to make America great again.
Now, I actually think part of that is true, that had Trump never decided to run in the first place, if he instead stayed a game show host, tabloid has-been, I think he probably would have gotten away with most of it. When you look at the disaster Donald Trump's presidency has been for this country and for the world, and when Trump himself looks at the disasters that make up his post-presidency business career and his public reputation, one thing I think we can all agree on, if we were given a truth serum, even him, is that life would be a heck of a lot better if he had never come down that golden escalator nearly a decade ago. Lisa Rubin's a former litigator, now an MSNBC legal correspondent who's been closely following the trial. Charles Coleman, former prosecutor, now civil rights and criminal defense attorney. It's great to have you both here. Lisa, I'll start with you. We sort of knew this was happening today. We knew it was going to be a judgment from this judge. Take me through how we should understand what this judge has handed down.
I think the way that we should understand what this judge has handed down is first in terms of the monetary penalties, which are gargantuan. He gave the Attorney General's office almost everything that they asked for, minus a few $1 million. The other thing I think we should understand is this doesn't put Donald Trump and his sons or his organization out of business in the way that people had thought that it might. Not only did Judge Engoron sort of wheel back his prior decision to cancel their business certificates, which Trump was going to appeal as soon as this judgment came, but he didn't grant the lifetime bans that the Attorney General had asked for, either on Trump's participation in the commercial real estate industry or on his simply serving as an officer or director of a New York corporation. The bans that are in place here are solely with respect to serving as an officer or director. Now, there's some other relief here, too. For example, they can't borrow money from a New York registered financial institution. That's a real impediment from anybody who has to restructure or refinance debt at this point.
That really jumped out to me.
Yes, it jumped out to me, too. But I think one way to think about this is Judge Engoron wasn't willing to be the person that forced a fire sale, but he was also not willing to let them walk on by unscathed. And he really bought the Attorney General's argument that you could have people take the stand and say, oh, no, well, we weren't really victimized because we got back every dollar that we loaned, and yet still understand that the whole purpose of the statute under which Donald Trump and his sons and everyone else was subject to liability here was about ensuring the integrity of the financial marketplace and what is still the financial capital of the world.
I want to ask you about something. Well, go ahead.
And there's a value in that in terms of if you're thinking long term and big picture. We all know that Donald Trump is going to appeal this. He's going to appeal the decision in the E. Jean Carroll case. He's going to appeal everything that he can. But when you're talking about a decision that's reasoned in this manner, it's not necessarily appeal proof. But what it is it's thought about in such a way that it makes it much more difficult to attack, in such a way that it's going to be enforced sooner than later. And that really matters.
Yeah. And it seemed like the sort of ratcheting back the sort of corporate death penalty was a huge part of that,
Correct.
sort of appeal-proofing this. Right. I want to ask, I'll ask you this, Lisa, because I would love to get your both thoughts on this. So when Trump says this never would have happened if I ran for president, I think that counterfactual is correct in the sense that he had gotten away with stuff like this for a long time.
Yes.
And what I can't figure out is, like, was he particularly egregious in his fraud? I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
Or do we just do we just kind of look the other way generally about this stuff, the white collar fraud and business and inflating of assets? And I thought Judge Engoron saying this was really interesting because he takes on this argument in the ruling. He says, indeed, the common excuse that everybody does it is all the more reason to strive for honesty and transparency and be vigilant in enforcing the rules. What do you think?
I think that's true. And when somebody makes a particularly visible and public example of themselves and calls attention to their fraud in the way that Donald Trump has by putting his real estate empire at the center of his political identity, I don't want to say to you that this would have never happened but for his becoming a political person, because Donald Trump has always loomed large in the life of New York. In fact, he narrowly escaped prosecution under a different district attorney, right, with respect to the Trump Soho property.
And he narrowly escaped criminal sanction in Atlantic City from gaming regulators there as well.
Yes. And one of the reasons he always escaped was that Donald Trump was sort of equal opportunity political giver and participated in the process and sort of glad-handed everyone. It was when he stopped greasing those wheels in the same way, becoming a congenial presence on the philanthropy circuit and the like, and calling attention to himself by being a very visible symbol of his excess and fraud, that I think he brought this upon himself.
And to pick up exactly where Lisa left off, there's a phrase that my friends and I often use. You made yourself hot. You made yourself hot because of the fact that you, in this political sphere, had already gone to the well so many different times before you got on the escalator and came down the stairs, that now at this point, everything that you did got even more attention, and this is where we are. This is the result. It's almost like you were actually skating by.
Yes.
You decided to push it one too many times in one too many different directions, and this is the result.
For one too many years. I mean, I would also say the fraud just got increasingly more and more brazen. The Trump Tower valuation is probably the most easy example to seize on, but this opinion and the trial itself was suffuse with other examples. One that I really like is that Mar-a-Lago has a restriction on its use that Donald Trump signed, he agreed to in 2002, saying that it could never be used as anything other than a social club. And yet he valued it as a private residence, and not only as a private residence, he valued it at 400 times the highest selling private residence in the United States. That's the kind of making yourself hot that I think Charles and I are talking about.
The appraised value was $18 to $27 million, which is a very, very expensive private home. He valued it $426.5 million to $612 million. That's just obviously more than orders of magnitude, more than one order of magnitude larger. Lisa Rubin and Charles Coleman, thank you very much. All right, coming up, today's ruling may not officially be the end of the Trump Organization, but it might come close. What it all means for the future of Donald Trump's business next.
Guess who always did the right thing? Guess who employs thousands of New Yorkers every single day, puts food on the table for their families, educates their children? You know, I mean, you have a lost state right now where you have businesses fleeing, and you have a company like ours that had paid over $300 million in taxes to a city. My father built the skyline of New York City, and this is the thanks he gets?
You built the skyline of New York City and the Eiffel Tower, too. You probably didn't know that, but it's true. Look it up. Donald Trump. In his latest legal judgment, Donald Trump owes just shy of $500 million in fines and interest. He intends to appeal the judgment, but if he does have to pay up, where will all that money come from? Joining me to help answer that is Andrea Bernstein. She covers Trump legal matters for NPR, is the author of American Oligarchs, the Kushners, the Trumps, and the Marriage of Money and Power. And you've been sitting in courtrooms for a lot of time.
A lot of time.
So first, let's just start with the money here and how it works. He has to post 120% of this judgment pretty soon, right?
Well, I mean, we'll see what kind of legal maneuvers they come up with. I don't want to ever predict anything with Trump, but as of now, he has to pay this money. I mean, there's an appeals process. It won't be final until it's final.
Right, but I think they have to put a bond up, right? I mean, he has to, my understanding is that the judgment requires him to put the money up now, pending appeal.
That's the usual procedure.
Right. You think he's going to wriggle out?
I think that, I don't know.
You have the same skepticism, right? There's a sense that it'll never happen.
Oh, I don't think it'll never happen, but I just, having spent all this time in courtrooms, I do feel that Trump's lawyers are pretty good at finding legal wrinkles for delaying things and for making things not happen that you think are going to happen. So, but anyway, yes, presumably he's going to have to come up with hundreds of millions of dollars to put aside pending a final disposition at the New York State Court of Appeals.
Now, let's say he doesn't win the appeal, right? So let's say he actually has to pay $500 million. What does that mean for? I mean, you've reported on this business for a long time, and it's fairly opaque. But what does that mean for the Trump org?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, it's really a lot of money. Really a lot of money.
I mean, yes,
by any standard. But one of the things that was interesting is in this trial there was a deposition that was done of Donald Trump, and he said, "I have $400 million in cash. I could sell Mar-a-Lago for $1.5 billion. I could sell the Doral golf course for $2.5 billion." I mean, obviously, a judge has just found that those
That's not true.
Lies.
That's literally the frauds that he
That is what he says. So if he had the money he said he had, no problem. He would have it in cash. But I mean, regardless, I mean, the man has assets for sure. There's Trump Tower. There are these golf courses that he has around the country. He owns enough value that if he had to divest himself of it, he could sell some assets to come up with the money that he'll need to come up with.
I mean, that's the big question, right? Is that if you can't borrow money to do this, and it's going to be very hard to find someone to loan you $500 million, I think, right?
Well, I mean, particularly now for Donald Trump, I mean, he can't borrow from a New York bank. I mean, I do want to say that with Donald Trump, I've gone through a lot of phases of sort of reporting and believing like, oh, yeah, no one's going to lend to him now. No one's going to lend to him after, he defaulted on all his loans. Deutsche Bank would never lend to him again because he defaulted on them. Right. And then they were the subject of this trial. After January 6th, no one was going to lend to him or do business with him. But he finds people, for example, the Saudis who have been, paying, obviously, Jared Kushner and also
Trump through
the golf courses, through the Live Golf circuit, which has turned out to be immensely profitable. So there are always people around Donald Trump who believe that if he's president, it's actually a small investment to help him out. Now, I mean, I am saying that in theory. I'm not saying to spend this judgment, but that is how he's kept his business going through all of these years, is by always finding somebody that believes it's in their interest to back Donald Trump. And
the Saudis can float him a loan. I mean, it's either going to be, he either has to have a loan, right? He either has loan, cash, or liquidating assets, some combination of those, right?
Exactly.
So what does it mean also that you can't do business in New York for 3 years? Like, given the corporate structure with him and his sons, like, what does that mean?
I feel like we really need to untangle that because he obviously is not a real estate developer anymore in New York. He is not really, he doesn't live in New York. He's not a New York resident. He's not building buildings. He's not developing. He can, set up Florida companies, presumably. So, I mean, a lot of his business has transformed over or has been combined with his campaigning. I mean, just, last year alone, some $50 million was spent from Trump political action committees to pay for his legal defense in these cases. So that, has not cost him anything, basically. It's been funded by donors. And he has managed to find a way, which was the subject of the podcast we did, Trump Inc. for a number of years, which was how to monetize the presidency, how to use it to sort of keep his brand going and switching over from business to politics to business to politics. And that is exactly the place that he's in right now.
Yeah, although I don't think, $50 million you can raise in a year, $500 million.
He may have to sell an asset, but he does own assets for sure. I mean, and even if Doral is not worth $2.5 billion,
I think it probably isn't.
For example, it's worth something. Golf, became popular during the pandemic. The value of these courses, which seemed like they were not going to be worth much, went up. So he certainly owns things. I mean, it's not because he's, what Eric Trump was saying, this productive, engaged businessman. That is not Donald Trump. He is running a presidential campaign trying to get back to the White House.
Right. And the thing that the business that he seems best at is raising smaller dollar donors. I mean, that really is the business that he's I think is his best business right now.
Yes. I mean, after January 6th on election lies, he raised vast quantities of money.
Yeah. After the election. Yeah. Right. In that period. So I guess the question is, if it doesn't really matter, you think he's going to sell something and be able to dispose of this and sort of move on?
I mean, it's impossible to predict, but that is one of his options. And that is what we may see. He does have the money. We'll see where he gets it from. He doesn't want to get it from any of those places.
All right, Andrea Bernstein, thank you very much. It's hard to remember, mostly because everyone just seems to want to forget about it, just how traumatic and consequential the year 2020 was. But in the latest episode of my podcast, Why Is This Happening?, which you can listen to by scanning the QR code on your screen, I talk through what we all went through and what we still have to reckon with. And my guest is author Eric Klinenberg. He's the author of this really phenomenal new book. It's called 2020, One City, Seven People, and the Year Everything Changed. I think that year explains so much of what we're experiencing now, particularly as we enter another presidential election. That episode is available now wherever you get your podcasts. But first, last night I said I would spare you all the video of Fox News host building up a now indicted witness against Hunter Biden. Tonight I changed my mind. It's worth it. Why the world is still waiting for an update from Sean Hannity and his crew. That's next. Last night, we brought you the story of the wildly embarrassing bombshell that has blown up the right-wing case against President Joe Biden and his sole surviving son. The special counsel investigating the Bidens, Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney David Weiss, has now indicted his own key informant for lying. 43-year-old Alexander Smirnov was arrested Wednesday and charged on 2 counts for feeding the FBI false information. Smirnov's allegation that Joe and Hunter Biden received $5 million bribes from a Ukrainian company has always been manifestly absurd. And yet, it was the central point of the Republican argument for President Biden's impeachment. Republican politicians and the right-wing media relied on this discredited informant to make their case over and over and over again.
A veteran FBI informant alleging both the president and Hunter Biden each took $5 million in bribes.
The details come from an FBI informant who is very trusted.
A highly reliable informant that has always checked out. All the information he's ever given us has checked out.
We have determined the whistleblower is extremely credible.
This is a very crucial piece of our investigation.
A confidential human source that had been reliable previously to the FBI.
A confidential informant that they had on the payroll.
Documented allegations of bribery from a trusted FBI confidential human source has now finally been released. Now, its contents are devastating.
Trusted, so reliable, highly credible. In fact, in just 1 year, Sean Hannity, that guy you just saw there, promoted the bogus claims of that so-called trusted informant no less than 85 times on his show. 28 of those segments were Hannity monologues, long ones, on the topic. And of course, it was a joint effort between Fox News and elected Republicans like Texas podcaster Ted Cruz, who talked about it ad nauseum on his thrice weekly program called The Big Cushy Chair, or whatever it is. So you might think, given the fact that their entire case just fell apart in the most public and embarrassing way imaginable, that at least some of these people would feel they had to address it. Say if you were a Fox News broadcaster who had been repeating what you now know to be a lie to your audience for months. No, of course, they didn't even mention it. As of last night, at least. Fox News, take a look at what they were talking about last night when the story broke on Fox News.
And welcome to Hannity. And today was an unmitigated disaster for Fulton County DA Fani Willis.
Fanny lines blurred, allowing a county DA to bring charges against a former U.S. president is absurd and destructive.
Fanny and the lover boy in the hot seat. The Trump Georgia case falls apart. But remember, this isn't a Fanny and Loverboy scandal. It's a Biden scandal.
We also have to remember that Joe Biden at this point is essentially a vegetable.
And another knock on Joe Biden's leaky bucket of a brain.
Obama and the CIA caught cooking the books. Brand new bombshells.
Just the usual charming content across all of Fox News primetime last night during this big story. There were 0 mentions of their favorite FBI informant. 0. Now, I think tonight they might get to it once they've gotten their stories straight. Break it to their audience. The person they've been relying on for over a year with this ludicrous claim wasn't telling the truth, has in fact been arrested for making it up. But, we know this. Fox News is not a journalistic organization. Their purpose is to create an alternate reality for their viewers where they hear only what the conservative movement wants them to hear. We know that because they paid out the largest media defamation settlement in all of U.S. history to the tune of nearly $800 million for creating the alternate reality the election was stolen from Donald Trump. And we know they knew that was false. And believe me, they saw the news about their number one informant yesterday. They just chose to ignore it. How embarrassing. Here I was thinking Sean Hannity always wants to set the record straight.
Again, on this show, we always want to set the record straight.
Shocking and awful news out of Russia today, where state media announced that Alexei Navalny, the most visible, outspoken opposition leader in the country, is dead. Navalny, who appeared alive and well just yesterday at a court hearing, you see there, came to prominence more than a decade ago as a fearless critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin. He exposed corruption, organized voters, inspired hundreds to rally in the streets, and was repeatedly arrested by Russian authorities on a dizzying array of charges. And then there were the physical attacks against him. In 2017, he was doused by a man on the street with a burning green substance. Then in 2020, on a plane from Siberia to Moscow, he suddenly fell ill.
Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Putin's most outspoken critic, was poisoned with a powerful nerve agent, according to the German government.
U.S. and European officials suspected a government assassination attempt and placed sanctions on Russian officials in response. Navalny then spent 5 months in Germany recovering from that attack, but insisted on going back and returning to Russia.
Do you think you'll be safe when you go back?
Well, I don't think that I can have such a privilege being safe in Russia, but I have to go back because I don't want these, groups of killers exist in Russia. I don't want Putin be ruling of Russia.
On his return in early 2021, as he knew that he would be, Navalny was arrested. He was shunted to prisons around the country. Last December, he disappeared from one of those prisons without explanation for weeks, until he turned up at an isolated maximum security prison in the Arctic Circle nicknamed Polar Wolf. It was there that he reportedly, according to state media, took an outdoor walk yesterday, again in February in the Arctic. Upon returning, he fell ill and could not be revived. Again, this is the story being told by the Russian prison authorities this morning in state media. None of Navalny's family or friends have been able to confirm what Russia is reporting. But ever since the news broke, vigils have sprung up in front of Russian embassies and consulates across the world, and most notably in Russia itself, where people laid flowers for Navalny at memorials for victims of Russian repression. Many mourners, including those you see there in St. Petersburg, were harassed and arrested by police as they came out to the streets. Navalny knew what would happen when he returned to Russia, and he had a message for his supporters in the world when it did.
My message for the situation when I'm killed is very simple: not give up.
Do me a favor, answer this one in Russian.
И здесь у меня просто очевидная вещь. Ну, не сдавайтесь. Не надо, нельзя сдаваться. Если это произошло, это означает, что мы необыкновенно сильны в этот момент, раз они решили меня убить.
Mikhail Zygar is the founding editor of the exiled independent Russian media outlet TV Rain. He's author of War and Punishment, Putin, Zelensky, and the Path to Russia's Invasion of Ukraine. He was in contact with Navalny during his imprisonment, received this letter from him in just this past week. And Mikhail Zygar joins me now. It's wonderful to have you, and I'm so sorry about what happened.
Yeah, and I can explain what means he went for a walk. In this letter here, he wrote to me that he could not see anything from his prison cell, and there was the next cell for walks. So when he was walking, he was not outside of the prison. He was inside, and he could not see anything outside. So yeah, it was much worse condition than we can imagine.
What I imagine you and people like you in your circle, people that have been opposed to Putin, Russian exiles and even people within Russia, have been anticipating this moment.
No. It's weird, but as we used to think that he's not an ordinary human being.
Navalny.
I remember that back in 2015, I published the book, All the Kremlin's Men, and one of the chapters was about Navalny. And I started that chapter saying that he's not an ordinary human being. He's an lion. He's supernatural. He has always been so sure that his destiny was to fight against the regime. And everyone seemed to consider him to be the person doomed to be the next president of Russia. He had to be Russia's first real George Washington. He had to be Russia's first democratically elected leader and the leader who wanted Russia to be a democracy. And we have always considered to be the next ideal president of Russia.
Like there was fate. He was fated.
Yes. He survived. He survived assassination attempt back in 2020. He was that time. It was a joke, but it was not funny. But it was a joke. He has always been compared to Harry Potter, who was not killed by
the boy who lived
by Voldemort. Yeah, and so it was impossible to even this morning. No one could believe that's something beyond our comprehension.
What does his death mean for Russia in this very, very fraught moment at a time when repression has, in the wake of the war, that's when you left, when basically in the wake of the war, new levels of repression, criminalization of even mentioning the war happened. You were forced to leave Russia at that time. At this moment when repression has increased so much, what does this mean?
A lot of people were and are crying today because of his death and because they think that they have lost hope. Because he was the only, for a lot of people inside of Russia and outside of Russia, he was the symbol of the possibility of that decent democratic future. And, during the whole day, I was trying to talk to people and try to give them some kind of hope. And my idea is that at least we have the moral example. At least now we have probably the first real democratic superhero in Russian history, because Russian history is very traumatic. And it's very imperialist. We have a huge history of violence, and not a history of prominent human rights defenders. So I think that the person who could have become our George Washington, sadly, has become our Martin Luther King. But he is going to be our moral example, and he is going to be the person who has led us, who has shown the way, and he was probably the only idealist, and he was the only politician for many years. I must say that the political process in Russia has been eliminated back 20 years ago. And he was the only person who could not agree with the fact that he could not be a politician. He was running political campaigns. He was fighting against President Putin. He was trying to run for the president back in 2018. And it's important that he has always been an idealistic person. He has always believed in human rights, in free speech, in possibility of fair justice. And, it's very remarkable for Russia, because Russia is a very cynical country. And, unfortunately, and that's the message that Putin's propaganda is trying to spread, that democracy is impossible. There are no democratic countries in the world. Free speech cannot exist. There is no fair justice anywhere in the world. Everyone is corrupted.
It's corrupt, it's rigged, it's fixed.
That's them. And he was the person who spent years trying to defend that righteous cause. And I think that it's very important, because he is going to be the hero for the generations to come, for the generations of Russians.
Mikhail Zygar, I can't tell you what an honor it is to have you here, and thank you for coming on a very, very difficult day.
Thank you
a lot. Thank you, sir. Still ahead, the one person stopping Republicans from providing aid to Ukraine and the ongoing threat of an American political party catering to Vladimir Putin. Next.
This tragedy reminds us of the stakes of this moment. We have to provide the funding so Ukraine can keep defending itself. against Putin's vicious onslaughts and war crimes. You know, there was a bipartisan Senate vote that passed overwhelmingly in the United States Senate to fund Ukraine. Now, as I've said before, and I mean this in a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching the House of Representatives. The failure to support Ukraine at this critical moment will never be forgotten.
The death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny and the reminder of the vicious nature of the Putin regime comes in this crucial moment where the Ukrainian army resisting Russian aggression is basically running out of bullets and sending dire warnings. A bipartisan package that includes aid for Ukraine has passed the Senate. The House is basically refusing to take it up under orders of Putin's number one American enabler, the head of the Republican Party, Donald Trump. Now, some Republicans have posted little tweets and statements, Speaker Mike Johnson even saying, "We must be clear that Putin will be met with united opposition." But they are not discussing the obvious elephant in the room, which is that the reason Mike Johnson is not taking up the foreign aid package is because Donald Trump doesn't want Ukraine aid to pass. He wants Putin to emerge victorious because he needs Putin's support. Joining me now is Congressman Mike Quigley, Democrat, Illinois. He represents one of the oldest and largest Ukrainian-American communities in the U.S. He's been an outspoken proponent of supporting Ukraine. He's also co-chair of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus. Congressman, it's great to have you on. First, just start with what you think the import of the death of Navalny in Russian custody is for the conversation debate about aid here in the U.S.
Sure. I think it's important that he not die in vain. He's a hero for our lifetime. The reason we're fighting in Ukraine is the reason we fought the Second World War, is the fight against tyrants taking over a sovereign democratic country. So I think the best way we can honor him is get the hell back to Washington, D.C. and pass this aid package. It's extraordinarily frustrating, largely because you talk about voices from the past. Let's remember the Reagan doctrine, right? He spoke eloquently of defending any ally against Soviet aggression, and there'd be no limit to that. Well, this is the quintessential opportunity to step up and do just that. And remember that, I guess I will also remember that we still have other friends there, Evan, Paul, Mark, and others, as well as roughly 100,000 Ukrainian children stolen by Putin. If this isn't the time we step up, we've got to ask ourselves who we are as a country.
Now, there is a Senate bill that's passed. The House has just been is on recess for the next 2 weeks, if I understand that correctly, through February 28th, I believe. This is the Wall Street Journal today talking about how Mike Johnson's basically lost control of the House of Representatives. I can't think of a better way to say it, and how he would get this to the floor. Johnson's challenge uses uniting his conference now loom over efforts to shore up Ukraine, just as Congress also faces deadlines next month to pass legislation funding the federal government and avoid a partial shutdown. House Democrats are weighing unusual parliamentary maneuvers that will require the help of at least a few Republicans to execute. They include a discharge position, a move designed to circumvent the House Speaker and force a vote on Ukraine. I read today that people were talking about a discharge position at the Munich Security Conference halfway across the world. What are the conversations amongst Democrats and maybe with other Republicans happening right now about this?
Look, there's probably about a half the Republicans in their caucus who support funding Ukraine. And how do you do that? How do you get a bill to the floor? First, real simple. The Speaker lets the bill get to the floor. I think democracy dictates that. When the Senate passes something in this day and age with 70 votes, McCann, put the bill on the floor. There are other options. As you might know, the paperwork was done today to do a discharge petition using that Senate bill. It's probably the only bill that can get to the president's desk. It is not perfect. Another bill that was attempted that also dealt with border security was squelched by, I guess, the Republican on high candidate Trump. So this is our best opportunity. I asked my Republican colleagues, I asked the Speaker of the House to have that sense of history and recognize that sometimes doing the right thing is more important than keeping your gavel. At some point, who's going to remember who the Speaker of the House was when we did something so horrible, and he's the one that held it back? That's a sense of history he should have as well.
Let me ask you, you've been very outspoken on this issue, and you represent a ton of folks who are Ukrainian American from the Ukrainian diaspora, and people have relatives and family there. Are there, you said half the Republican caucus, and my sense is there's probably 300 votes in the House right now, something like that, for this aid package, maybe 280 somewhere there. Are there people on the Republican side in leadership who share your conviction? And do they have any say in this? I mean, is it just Johnson taking orders from the sort of far right of the caucus and Trump, or are there people who view this the same way you do?
Oh, look, I traveled to Germany with Republicans who care. We were visiting Ukrainian troops, learning how to use our tanks. I traveled to Ukraine with French Hill, who is very dedicated to this cause. My message to all my Republican friends is, if the far right can hijack your party with 10 to 20 people, you can take it back. You can make a stand. If 10 or 20 can threaten the speaker and to do the wrong thing, nearly half of the caucus can threaten the speaker to do the right thing. There's not going to be a more important bill that deals with democracy in our lifetime. I said this is the reason we fought the Second World War. It's why we formed the United Nations. It's why we formed NATO. It is the essence of our own security. If we don't remember voices from the past, let's remember those from the future. Let's think about those from right now, that is. General Milley and Secretary Austin, who said, if you don't stand up to the aggression of Putin, you're going to have to double our defense budget, and you're certainly inviting more bloodshed.
All right, Congressman Mike Quigley again. Congressman from Illinois, Chicago, neighborhoods I lived in and loved. It's great to have you on, Congressman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
That does it for All In. You can catch us every weeknight at 8 o'clock on MSNBC. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/allinwithchris.